Welcome back to another episode of Bombshell1111 Girl Talk Series Podcast. Bombshell1111 is a platform created to teach ways to nourish the mind, body, and soul. This platform allows this podcast to create weekly content on podcasts with special guests each week that will stimulate your spiritual, mental, and physical growth. The podcasts are played on social media platforms such as Spotify, YouTube, Anchor Radio Station, Apple Podcasts, and more. This station has been created to allow us to interact with each other to share knowledge, wisdom, understanding, and light. So without further ado, please help me welcome your host and founder of Bombshell 1111 Girl Talk Series, Keya.
Back everybody to another episode of Bombshell1111 Podcast, Therapy for Women of Color. My name is Keya and I'm your host. Tonight, you guys, we have a very special guest by the name of Dr. Gail Hamilton. Dr. Gail Hamilton has a business by the name of Be Connected. This business provides business education and enterprise solutions to individuals and businesses. This includes financial education on how to protect assets and structure generational wealth through private family trusts, private business trusts, and private foundations. So you guys, without further ado, let's welcome Dr. Gail Hamilton to the podcast. Welcome, Dr. Gail. How are you?
Hello, how are you? And thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for coming on, and you're more than welcome. I'm so happy that you decided to come on and be a guest because I think that the education that you're providing to the community, I think it's an awesome thing. And I think that tonight you're going to educate us on a lot of things that we need to know in reference to our future and building a legacy for ourselves. So thank you again for coming on and being a part.
Thank you. Yes.
So Dr. Gail, let's just go ahead and jump right in. I know I did do a small introduction on who you are and where you're from and what you do. But can you give the audience a brief, short introduction on just who you are, what you do, and a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I grew up in Louisiana, so I'm from your neighboring state of Mississippi. I am 65 years young, and I've had a career in the public and private sector. I've spent 20 years in the military. I worked for a U.S. senator. I've traveled around the world, and now that I've retired, I'm in Jacksonville, where my daughter is, and I'm here spoiling my two grandkids. And so my business is Be Connected, and the reason I selected that Be Connected is usually when we're trying to establish or set up a business, when we're trying to set up and protect our family to make sure that they're protected if something should happen to us. We don't often have the resources. And so the B, as in BEE connected, is there to symbolize that we can, no matter how small we are, we can do anything. And so my business is to help everyday people like Sly and the Family Stone. I don't know if many of you are old enough to remember that song.
No, ma'am.
see that we are everyday people. So my business is everything from mentoring younger men and women in how to maneuver and balance life and work, to our newest venture, which is helping people establish private family trusts, private business trusts, and private foundations.
Wow, that's good. That's a lot. I know that you talk a lot about assets and things of that nature. Can you educate us a little bit more on exactly how important that is to protect your assets, and go a little bit into detail about your I know you have 4 pillars that you call keys.
4 keys to wealth. Yes.
Correct. Can you talk about those in detail for us so we can have a little bit more education on that as well?
Yes. And so what I'm about to share with you, people have to be prepared to do because we've been taught to go out here and work and get our W-2 and pay our taxes. But yet we see people like Bill and Melinda Gates, the Rockefellers, Warren Buffett, and you wonder, wait a minute, they're not paying taxes. How is that? And so I came across this information by accident because it is not taught in school to us. Usually this information is shared with people with the 10 million in income, 10 million in investment capital, and 10 million in assets. And so being at the table and hearing this, and I said, wait a minute, well, what about the ordinary people? What about everyday people like me? Is it possible? And so what my business did, Be Connected, was partnered with Legacy Management, which is a big corporate company who usually helps people set up these private trusts. And so we come up with a model where I share the 4 keys of wealth and do private one-on-one consultation to see if setting up a private family trust is for everyone. Okay. So as we talk about asset protection, this is what we're accustomed to or know about. We'll set up a will or simple trust. Now, I call a will and a simple trust a D&D. It distributes your assets when you are deceased. Once again,
I get it.
With a will, when you're gone, it'll distribute your assets. There's a cost. It goes through probate. And so 22 to 25% of whatever you have in there goes to the attorney, whoever is doing it. Then there's a tax consequence, an inheritance tax that is paid by people who receive the assets. A simple trust is set up by an attorney, and it's a statutory document because attorneys are licensed by each state. So you may say, I have a simple trust. That's fine if you plan on being in California all your life, but if you move across the country like I did to Florida, then it's no longer good. And again, the only thing it does is maybe distribute some income while if you have income in there and you want it dispersed a certain way, but otherwise the same thing, it disperses your assets when you're gone.
So Dr. Gail, let me ask you a question right there. When you spoke about an attorney, how does an individual choose a correct or the proper asset protection attorney?
Well, this is where I'm trying to this is why I'm sharing this information. Attorneys are not even familiar with this. A complex trust, which is what our business talks to people about, a complex trust, and people can Google this. A complex trust is a living document. It's a 3-party contract. And assets, you manage the assets in the trust now, and those assets are there upon your demise and is there forever. The complex trust has its own EIN number. It's its own person.
Okay.
So when I was going through training the last 2 years, the room is usually full with CPAs and attorneys learning about this so they can share with their customers. So if you go to a regular current attorney and say, I want a complex trust, he'll probably put you in a simple trust. Even once you get your trust documents, you go to the bank. If you don't say the right thing, that I'm coming in to open a trust account, they think you're coming in to open up a business account. Because this is not something that everyday people will do. And that's what we at Be Connected are trying to do, is educate everyone that, hey, you can have and protect your assets and create generational wealth also. Okay.
You can go ahead and proceed. I just had a question in reference to attorneys, and you brought that up, and I wanted to.
Excellent question. What you do upon hearing this, and we'll talk about it a little more at the end, you go to beconnectedlife.com and you set up a one-on-one consultation, and we work and we create all the documents that you need, the legal documents. We get your EIN number and everything you need to set up a complex trust. We have a legal department. We have people who are trained in doing this. We have CPAs who at the end of the year, if you need a CPA, because there's even a form that's different. So let me just slow down a second, because people are going to ask, is this legal? Yes, it is. And here's what you do. You currently, Lakeya, you're familiar with doing the 1040 at the end of every year, right?
Right.
All right. I want people to go to irs.gov and download the 1041.
Okay.
Write that down, the 1041.
That's exactly what I'm doing. I'm writing that down. Okay.
And this is the document that you use when you have a trust to do your taxes.
Okay.
It's there. It's out there. if you, I always recommend to readers, because this is a mind shift. I don't think it takes too much for us to realize that there's 10% of the people that are doing things differently and the rest of us working and paying taxes.
Right.
There's a book called The Creature from Jekyll Island. Because I don't want people just to take my word for it. The Creature from Jekyll Island talks about how certain elite gentlemen in this country got together and formed the Federal Reserve. They set up this banking system that we now have. Well, let me put it this way. They refined the banking system. Have you seen the musical Hamilton on Disney Plus?
No.
In person?
No, ma'am.
Okay. In that, they talk about Hamilton. They talk about us beating the British. And there's a discussion between Hamilton and Jefferson about setting up our banking system. And in that argument, it's whether or not, how much of the money, who would control all the money. So this system that we now see where banks control everything was really established in the 1800s after the war.
Okay.
And The Creature from Jekyll Island was a group of men who got together and decided how the IRS system and these forms and who would pay what. So that's how it was designed to be a two-party system. And so what we say is we have the informed and the uninformed. And so what we're here to do is make everyone informed. So download the 1041, and that's the form when you have a complex trust. That is the form that you would complete for your trust.
So you raised another question for me, Dr. Gail. You were talking about taxes and things of that nature. So can I save, or can an individual that has a small business, can they save income taxes with asset protection planning? And will their asset protection planning cause them to be audited by the IRS?
Okay, so here's where it's a mind shift. It's a whole different process when you have a complex trust, which is why you will never see the president's taxes. When you have a trust, those documents are not public record, and they're submitted to the EO, the exempt organization section of the IRS. So when you have a complex trust, it's not audited, because your trust may be different from my trust and what it's going to pay for.
Okay.
So let me clarify, because people say, "Oh, is this the way I don't have to pay taxes?" Please take this away. Every entity in the United States has to pay taxes.
Right. Okay.
Here's the key. The language you want to use is you want to reduce your tax liability.
Okay.
You want to learn how to reduce your tax liability so you can be like the Gates and Jeff Bezos, who owns Amazon and made $50 billion, some ridiculous number, and paid zero taxes.
Wow. Okay.
There's a way through the IRS to reduce your tax liability. And that's what we teach you to do with a series of interrelated trusts.
Okay.
So here's the 4 keys to wealth, and I'm going to talk you through, if you have a business or if you don't have a business, how you can protect your assets.
Okay.
You ready?
I'm ready.
Okay, so the 4 keys to wealth. Putting your wealth in the correct tax position. Again, most of us are out here just working and doing taxes at the end of the year. If you have a business, you have a LLC. If you are sole proprietor, then your taxes are filed against your Social Security number.
Right.
Which means, by the way, that you're exposed for liability, and everything you own is at risk. Which is why we say complex trust, learn how to protect your assets.
Okay.
Then protecting your wealth. We teach you how to separate your business expenses from your personal expenses. People have an LLC and they think that means I'm protected from liability. The first word in LLC is what, Keya? Limited.
Limited. You're correct.
Limited.
Yes.
And nobody's taking a clue from that. Because this is tied to your Social Security number, what we teach you in step number 2 is write this down.
Okay.
Liability follows title.
So true, Dr. Gail. I had a business some years ago, and I was not smart enough to know that. So like you just said, It was an LLC, but guess what? I didn't understand the tax thing, all that type of thing. Even after the business dissolved, guess who still was responsible for the taxes?
You.
Correct. Correct. So I'm definitely...
Yeah, so we teach you how to separate your business from your personal, because a lot of us are running our businesses, paying for stuff out of our own personal banking account.
Yes.
If anything happens and somebody sues you, you've just invited people directly back into your home, and everything you own is at jeopardy.
Yes.
So protecting your wealth, we show you how to separate your business from your personal. Liability follows title. Nelson Rockefeller said, own nothing but control everything. So when you set up a complex trust, you put your assets, and that's why I don't like to use asset protection, because that's usually referred to as simple trust or a will.
Okay.
When you put your assets into a complex trust, you no longer own them. When you put your house or the equity in your house or your life insurance policies or your land you might own into a complex trust, it becomes the property of the trust. You are the trustee, and you control and manage the trust.
Wow. Okay.
So if you as a business person in your LLC, when you get a complex trust, because your business LLC, we suggest to people, you operate from a multi-member LLC. So in this example, it has an LLC has two people. Lakeya is number one, and Lakeya's trust is member number 2.
Okay.
So this month, Lakeya made $5,000 in her business. You have enough money to cover your operating expenses. Say your operating expenses for the business was $1,000.
Okay.
You have $4,000 left. Now, don't go out and buy a Corvette or a Maserati.
Which most of us do, but okay, well, yes.
What is your age? So, so that income, if you leave it there, is taxable at the end of the year. If you leave it there and someone sues you, they can take it. So you use the IRS form Schedule K1, and every week or whenever you do your P&Ls, you then move that money to your member trust. So you keep only enough in your business to cover your expenses, and then you move the excess money to your complex trust.
Wow. So that's how they do it. Okay.
Money in motion makes money. This is another thing. Money in motions make money. The next key is getting your wealth to work for you. You have to move your money. Mindset shift.
Okay.
We start to put our money into the bank and let it, any extra money, and let it sit there and earn 0.01%. No, money in motion makes money. So what we do is we show you how to keep your money moving by buying a variety of things. Now, we don't sell any products. We just give you information on what's out there. Buy gold, buy silver, set up an endowment. Maybe the school you went to, you want to set up a $5,000 or $10,000 endowment. That's the other thing about having our product shared with people is our business model rather, is that usually people say, okay, I'm going to do an endowment at Harvard. Well, you need $500,000 to go there. But you might want to set up an endowment at the local Boys and Girls Club.
Okay.
So we work with you to get to small institutions. And so when you set up an endowment, you set up a contract so that, and an agreement so that they split the interest with you. You give them $5,000, you give them $10,000, and they split the interest with you for life with your trust, so that you'll be gone and your initial $10,000 investment that's tied to your trust that the trust gave to the Boys and Girls Club will be earning interest long after you're gone.
So, Dr. Gail, for the listeners in the audience that are not familiar what endowments are, can you break that down and explain that to the listeners in the audience, please?
Sure. A lot of people, you've gone to a hospital or an institution and you've seen a wall that has bricks or gold lettering and said endowment. When you go to a hospital, you see a wall. An endowment is, unlike Currently, we will put our $10,000, I just use it because it's nice round money, in the bank.
Mm-hmm.
And it gets, if you're lucky, you're in a high yield savings account or CD of 1.1%. And then if you want your money back, you better give them 3 or 4 days to give it back to you, because he's acceptable. With an endowment, you take your $10,000, you go to American Red Cross, you go to your local university or your alma mater and say, I want to make an endowment of the Keya Lee Chair for Behavioral Health.
Mm-hmm.
And what endowments will do is they take your principal and invest it. They never give away their principal. They invest your $10,000 with somebody else's $50,000, with somebody else's $100,000, and it's earning interest. And you'll say, I'm going to give you my $10,000 and I want 4% interest back for life.
Mm-hmm.
And they'll go, okay, because it didn't cost them anything.
Okay.
They may make $20,000 on your 10.
Mm-hmm.
I mean 20%. So they've come out ahead, and they're making this daily.
Right.
So it's the same thing the banks do. But what we do in number 3 is getting your wealth to work for you. Is we teach you, rather than go give the bank $10,000 and the bank is making interest off of you, you find places to put your own $10,000, and you determine it through a contract how much interest you want on it.
Wow. Okay.
Getting your wealth to work for you.
Okay.
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 The last one is passing on your wealth.
Mm-hmm.
When you set up a complex trust, you're the initial trustee. You then designate who your successor trustees will be. If something happens to you, the successor trustees step in. There's no legal, there's no court. Nobody has to go to probate. They step up and they take over the reins of that trust.
Mm-hmm.
You can also set up a bloodline clause. There's a number of ways you can specify. We call it control from the grave. Once you're gone, you can specify in your trust what you want done with the proceeds from your life insurance or homes or whatever you have in there.
Okay.
And then you can also say that I think do you have children? You have 1 or 2 children?
Two daughters.
Anyway,
Yeah.
Two daughters. You can say my successor trustees and my 2 daughters.
Mm-hmm.
Trustees will only be bloodline, and they will only be the descendants of my daughter. They can never be your son-in-laws, your son-in-law's mom or dad.
Okay, that's good
So
to
that
know.
so that you can ensure, it's called a bloodline clause. You can ensure that all the assets and everything that you've put into your complex trust will only be managed by your direct descendants.
Okay. And you know what? I'm glad you brought that up, Dr. Gail, because I did have a couple of questions that kind of go hand in hand for those individuals that are married. How does that work for individuals? Let's just say they both have businesses and the assets are in joint names with their spouse. Are they protected or individually or together? And then also, I'm sorry. And then also with the married individuals, let's just say someone, they have businesses for a lot of years and they're in the middle of getting a divorce or something of that nature. Does this still work for them as well?
Well, two different things. When you have a business, let's say a husband and spouse have a business, and the partner is the complex trust. Mm-hmm. So that income is moving through the business, money in motion is moving to the trust. Mm-hmm. That money then becomes the trust. You no longer have any ownership of that.
Wow. Okay.
So if they have a business and they during the first year put $100,000 into the complex trust, it's not theirs. They are the trustee of $100,000. And they're probably going to be, if they're married, they're going to both be trustees. Mm-hmm. If they get a divorce, too bad. That anything in that complex trust belongs to the trust. The same way they can sue the husband and he can say, I don't own anything, but you have a trust. No, I don't have a trust. The trust has its own EIN. I'm a trustee to the trust. I own nothing.
Wow.
So it protects the assets because the purpose is to protect your assets and pass it on to the next generation.
Right. Yeah.
So that's the good thing about, and if you get a divorce, you can say, hey, we can still be trustees on this trust. So you can go ahead, if you don't want to be a trustee, you can work it out in divorce papers, but nothing comes out of that trust. Once anything goes into the trust, it stays in the trust.
Wow. Okay. Well, that answers that question.
So you can't use it to hide stuff from the spouse or, that type of thing. So, and then people who are trustees, if you have two trustees, they have 50% asset and voting rights. It's equal once it's in the complex trust. So the same thing if you have two daughters, one can't be 70%, 30% or anything like that. I mean, you can designate it, but most people don't, because the reason you want a trust is to keep family harmony.
Right.
So does that answer that?
That definitely does. That definitely does. You can continue with key 4.
Okay, so 4 was passing on your wealth. And as she said, one of the things you want to do is when you're a husband, wife, you can put assets into the trust. I started out with a private family trust because I have my daughter and 2 grandkids. And I wanted to make sure that the assets would be there for my grandkids to go to college, etc. And so my daughter, and I know her and I tell her, this is our joke, if something happens to me tomorrow, she would not be at the Nissan dealer buying a little car. She would be at the Bugatti dealership and in 24 hours, drive off the lot with a car. So, my life insurance policies, my assets, my home, even if you have a home with a mortgage, but there's equity in that home, you can place a lien against that home. So that if anything happens, say you have a house that's worth $200,000, you owe $100,000 on it.
Mm-hmm.
You make a lien, your trust would place a lien on the first at $100,000 in equity. So if something happens and the house is sold, it goes into the trust without a capital gains tax.
Okay.
It goes into the trust without a capital gains tax. If something happens to you and your house is not in the trust, if it's sold, what happens? You got to pay a 39% capital gains tax.
Mm-hmm.
Even if you just go out today and sold a house and you had equity in it, you have a capital gains tax unless, tax laws, you put it back into another house, So the nice thing about putting assets and placing lien against assets is that is first in line to collect tax-free.
Okay.
Now, every trust has a tax consequence because even when it's in the trust, say you end up you're putting $150,000 into your trust. Mm-hmm. If your expenses for the trust is $50,000, that leaves $100,000. It would be taxed at 39%.
Wow.
But what you do is you then donate and move that money on a K-1, an IRS form, mm-hmm. from your business trust to your family trust. Mm-hmm. Family trust has $10,000 in expenses, so that leaves you an extra, $100,000. You then move that to your private family foundation. So you just zeroed out your private family trust. Okay. Once you make that donation down to your foundation, the private family foundation, which is different from a public foundation. When you move that money to a private family foundation, the taxes at that rate on a private foundation is 5%.
Okay.
So you reduce your tax income from hundreds of thousands of dollars to maybe $5,000 to $6,000.
Wow. Okay.
Now, the foundations that we help you set up are 501c3. The difference between a private foundation, which is like Bill and Melinda Gates, mm-hmm. and a public foundation like Boys and Girls Club. Most of you know nonprofits, there's a board. All the mm-hmm. money that you make has to go back to that one mission that was set up or established when that nonprofit was established.
Right.
In a private family trust, your mission is to do the community good.
Okay.
Again, do the community good. So today, if you want to help people with the forest fire in California, you can help. If tomorrow you want to help people with the hurricanes in Florida, you can help. If the day after that you want to help seniors, if the day after that you want to help young boys, if the day after that you want to help babies, as long as it does the community good.
Okay. Wow.
And there is no limit on the amount of income that you can have sitting in a private family foundation. I repeat, there is no limit on the income you can have just sitting in your private family foundation. Unlike a nonprofit, which I've run, you have to spend all that money and have a board and etc.
Right.
Okay, so that's the differences between the public and private foundation. There are advantages to a private foundation. You can buy and own real estate. You can invest in other businesses. You cannot do that with a public foundation or a public 501c3.
Right.
So those are the 4 keys to wealth. Now, here's the other thing about, you say, well, why move my money from my LLC to a trust? In your trust documents, the trust says that it is responsible for the trustee is responsible for managing the trust 24/7. That means the trust is responsible for the housing, transportation, health and life insurance, education, communication expenses of the trustee. That means it can pay for your housing, your health insurance, education for your kids if you want to pay for their tuition, because they're successor trustees, they have to be educated. 100% tax deductible inside the trust.
Okay.
If you wrote a check to your daughter's college today, it is not 100% tax deductible.
Okay.
Everybody should be having an aha moment right now. That's the advantage of a complex trust.
Okay.
Now, some of you are going to call your attorney and CPA and they say, we've never heard of it. We are happy to get on the phone with you and your attorney and CPA because we're training them. We're training them.
So you got the juice, Dr. Gail.
The majority of people have been attorneys and CPAs. So please, we would love to do this call, because when we educate them, rather than you trying to explain to them, we educate them and then they can present this information to their clients.
Right. So Dr. Gail, with everything that you shared tonight on the podcast, what can you leave the audience and listeners with? What one piece of advice would you leave the audience with?
Look at creating a complex trust and change. Let me back that up. Change your mindset. Start asking questions. What's this difference between a 1040 and 1041? We have to get out of this notion of owning stuff. And I'm just as guilty.
Okay.
I was taught to own stuff. It's not about owning. Own nothing, control everything. Yeah. If you ever watched The Men Who Made America on the Smithsonian Station, for your audience, go back and watch it. It will make sense what happened when Rockefeller had Standard Oil and he had accumulated all the oil companies, and they fought 4 years, the government, to break that monopoly. And he finally said, okay. And so he divvied it up into 32 companies. But guess what? He sat on the board of all of those companies. He was a trustee. So he said, I own nothing, but I control everything. And to this day, Rockefeller is still making money off of BP, Texaco, Shell. Because he sat on the board and was a trustee of all of those companies. Microsoft, Bill Gates owns nothing. Now think about that. Is that really possible? Yet he has houses, planes, etc. I take that back. His trust owns and his foundation owns houses, planes, because he has to get around. He's not going to fly coach.
Right.
So is it about owning it or controlling it?
Controlling it.
Yes. So that would be the takeaway.
Wow.
Own nothing, control everything.
Yes, that's deep. And when
I want to be like Bill Gates.
that,
I want to own absolutely. I want to be like Jeff Bezos. I want to own nothing.
Right.
Nothing. That way, if anybody tries to sue you, whatever, I don't own anything. I don't own anything. With everything that Amazon has going on. Nobody, have you heard of a lawsuit against Amazon? Some employees wanted to sue, but otherwise, nobody sued him.
That's smart. That's smart. Yeah.
We have to shift what we've been taught all these years. Own, buy stuff.
That's true. That's true. Even in my generation, we are taught that you have to own everything. You have to own everything, but not thinking about if you're controlling it, you're actually owning it when you're controlling it.
Right.
Yeah. So changing the way you think. You're right, Dr. Gail.
It's the mind shift.
Yeah.
Mindset shift.
Absolutely right. So, Dr. Gail, we are almost at the end of our podcast for tonight. But before we end, can you let the audience and listeners know, do you have any upcoming events, major things coming up soon so we can be on the lookout for those?
Well, be connected. What we're doing, the podcast, but we really want people to go to our site and schedule one-on-one consultation where we can, spend a little more time and walk you through the 4 keys to wealth. Look at what your situation is. Some people may have businesses and need a business trust. Some people may be like me. I started with I needed to immediately have my assets protected in my family trust. So it allows us to do that one-on-one consultation. So go to Be Connected Life. That's BEE as in the bumblebee, BEE Connected, CONNECTED life.com. And make your appointment for your one-on-one consultation.
Okay.
And then if you need to reach me, I'm Doc Gail at docgail.com. That's DOCGAIL at docgail.com.
Okay. So, Dr. Gail, I know that you have family and everyone may be listening. So do you want to give any shouts out, any hellos to anyone before we end here tonight?
Yes, I always want to give a shout out to my daughter, my princess, to Danielle and to my grandkids, Kason and Audriel.
Hey, y'all.
Shout out to them. To my son Dean, that's in Houston. I have two children, and then my 2 grandkids that are here with me in Jacksonville that I'm spoiling. So yes.
Thank you so much, Dr. Gail. It was a pleasure having you tonight on Bombshell1111 Podcast, Therapy for Women. You definitely brought a lot of therapy for us tonight to think about, just some things to marinate on our brain and going forward, especially those individuals who are seeking to start small businesses or just even, like you said, protect their own personal assets and things of that nature. So again, I thank you a lot for coming on and sharing, and I hope to see you soon. You will be coming back because you also have some exciting things coming up in reference to books. So do you want to just give a little snippet of that? Because she's going to come back, you guys, and talk more in depth about her most
recent book.
Yeah,
thank you. The book is Wisdom from Queens, Volume 3. If you go to docgail.com, that's docgail.com, you can find the book there. Each year, this company select 5 queens to share their life. And for me, it's been, with everything we're seeing right now with the racial unrest, employment, and gender discrimination, I lived through that. I grew up in rural South, in rural Louisiana and segregated South. And I lived from segregation through desegregation into integration. And so people said, hey, you need to share your story. And so that's what I do. We share lessons that people can use for everyday living and what we're seeing today. So hopefully go to docgail.com. You can find out more about the book, and hopefully you'll have me back and we can talk more about the book here on Bombshell.
Thank you so much for that, Dr. Gail, and we will be having you back. She'll be back, you guys, sometime mid-October. So be on the lookout and on the listen for that. So you guys, without further ado, thank you so much for tuning in. And always remember, you are a bomb within your own shell. Peace, love, and light, you guys. Good night. If you enjoyed this podcast, please make sure you subscribe so you're notified when a new episode is posted. Rate, review, and share this podcast with your family and friends. Thanks so much for listening, and I hope you're leaving with some valuable information that can help you on your personal journey. Also, check us out on Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram at Bombshell1111 or at Bombshell1111 TV. You can also check out our mental health page, Your Health is Your Wealth, on Facebook, which is a page created to inform and support individuals with mental health and other health conditions. And with that being said, always remember, you guys, you are a bomb within your own shell. And until next time, peace, love, and light.